Welcome to the Red Stories. It inspires me if you subscribe and like. Maybe another comment. Thank you, thank you. I met my now ex-girlfriend 4 years ago in college. Until recently, she seemed like the kind of woman I wanted to marry. Extremely kind, genuine, and generally a joy to be around. My older sister and her husband had a daughter at the beginning of our relationship, and I couldn't have been happier to become an uncle. She was the cutest thing in the world to me. I tried to be the cool uncle, and always found time for her. My sister would often bring her over for me to babysit when she had something going on. To my knowledge, my girlfriend also seemed to get along well with her, and was never against babysitting with me. The best moment I shared with my niece was when my sister showed me a drawing she made about me in kindergarten. I was on the verge of tears when I saw it. A year ago, my world turned upside down when my sister called me, crying, to tell me that my niece had been diagnosed with leukemia. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. The past year has been incredibly tough for all of us. I spend most of my free time in the hospital with my sister and brother-in-law. Seeing that poor girl with tubes attached to her broke my heart. I regularly brought her balloons and made balloon animals for her, something I learned to do while working at a carnival in my younger years. As a result, I spent less time with my girlfriend. She seemed to understand, at least at first. But when my niece's condition worsened, things started to change. From Saturday to Sunday, I was either at the hospital or drinking myself to sleep. One day, on our 3rd anniversary, my girlfriend completely ignored me. I brought her flowers, a cake, and made her a card, but she didn't get me anything. When I pressed her about it, she said something that shocked me. She said, "Well, it doesn't seem like you care, so why should I get something for someone who cares more about a child that's going to die anyway?" I didn't know what she was expecting. Long story short, I threatened to kick her out and tell everyone I knew, including my sister, who was close friends with my girlfriend, about what she said. She apologized, saying she wasn't thinking straight and that something like this would never happen again. I eventually forgave her, and we moved on. Last week, my niece passed away, and it has been the worst period of my life. I've been crying myself to sleep every day and spending a lot of time with my sister to support her. Something that caught me off guard was that my girlfriend seemed almost too happy at the news of my niece's passing. She smiled and said, "I'm so happy she's not suffering anymore and is in a better place now," with a big grin on her face. Yesterday, I overheard her talking to a friend on the phone. I had just come home from work, and I guess she didn't hear me come in. I heard her say a real man wouldn't cry unless it was his own child dying. That really threw me off. I kept listening, and she went on to call me a crybaby and said I shouldn't be so attached to a kid that wasn't even mine. I coughed loudly to get her attention, and her face went pale when she saw me. She tried to explain herself, but I just told her to pack up and leave. After about an hour of begging, she finally gave up, packed her things, and left. As she was leaving, she tried to spit at me, but ended up spitting on herself. A few hours later, her mom called me, begging me to give her another chance. I snapped and told her to go **** herself and her unstable daughter. That night, I drank half a bottle of Jack Daniels and went to bed. This morning, I woke up to texts from my sister. She told me my ex had explained everything to her. While my sister understood why I kicked her out, she suggested I might want to give her another chance. She said my ex seemed sincere in her apology and asked what my niece, Lily, would have wanted. That broke me. My niece loved my ex-girlfriend and would always run up to her, asking her to play Barbies with her. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I'm deeply hurt by what my ex said and can't imagine ever opening up to her again. On the other hand, my sister has forgiven her, and maybe I should too. Am I being irrational here? Should I forgive her? Am I the idiot? Today, we were about out the door when she broke down and told me she wasn't ready. I just said I understand, and I went over to the playground to try and bond in some way. It turns out Paul is big into superheroes. He pretended to be Spider-Man and I had to be Rhino. I chased him all over the playground and let him web me up. He laughed and smiled when the food was ready. I was happy to see he liked his hot dogs the same as me. Ketchup on one side, mustard on the other, relish on top. I thought maybe this won't be so hard. Then he called Kevin Dad. I shouldn't have been surprised by this. He's been in this kid's life for 2.5 years. He's marrying his mom, and they all live in the same house. That said, it was like a knife in the heart. I began to tear up and excused myself for a moment, saying I was going over to the Gross Park bathroom. When I came out after a minute, Kevin was waiting. I could see my parents across the way watching Paul. I felt instantly awkward. The last thing I wanted right now was a heart-to-heart with Kevin. He was taller than me, more built than me, and had gotten to have the life I was supposed to have. He just said, "Can we talk?" I said, "Yeah, man, what's on your mind?" Kevin began, "Look, I'm sorry for what happened to you. It's a bad deal all around. I just wanted to talk because I'm worried about Emily and Paul. Emily more than him. She hasn't been herself, which I can appreciate to some degree. It took a long time for her to get over you. I'm the first person she dated after your incident. She cried the first time we kissed because it was different. I want you to have a relationship with your son. He's little. He's resilient. I had 2 dads growing up. I know he will be fine. I don't know how fine her or you will be if this goes too fast, and from a selfish standpoint, I don't want anything disrupting our life or our engagement. I love her and want what's best. I'd like you to take it slow, process everything before you meet." I made an appointment for her to see a counselor. I'd appreciate it if you could respect that and not push her or reach out to her. Let her figure things out on her own first. I was pissed listening to him, pretentious sass, but he had some points. I didn't want to rip open all these old wounds. I ended up just saying, "Yeah man, I can do that," and walked off to join my parents and Paul. Kevin went into the gross bathroom. When he came back over, he said he and Paul were going to head out. Paul gave everyone hugs, including me. I was surprised but pleasantly. Then he called me Rhino and ran off to Kevin. As they left, I heard him say, "Dad, can we get a cookie cake on the way home?" He's Dad. I'm Rhino, and this just effing sucks. Update. We finally met. We started by texting a bit, but it felt so impersonal. The conversation stayed at a surface level. The deepest we really got was talking about Paul and me briefly divulging what Cambodian prison was like. Over the 3 weeks between our first text exchange and our meetup, we only texted maybe 5 times. Each time, it started to get into heavy subjects, and one of us would end the conversation. During that time, though, I did spend more time with Paul. My mother began watching him at her house again, and that gave us time to bond. I even had some one-on-one time with him when we went to get ice cream together one day. It's amazing how resilient kids are. He just goes with the flow of everything. He still calls me Rhino, but maybe I'll get the dad title soon. One day this past week, when Kevin came by to pick up Paul, he asked to talk again. This time, he had a job offer for me, which had me getting pissed. Then he elaborated that it wasn't really an offer but more of a lead. His brother owns a construction company and is looking for an estimator. Kevin told his brother I was once an architect, and his brother said he'd give me an interview if I was interested. He left his brother's card with me. I really want to hate Kevin, but he does actually seem to be a genuinely nice person, which also pisses me off. His self-deprecating sense of humor grows on you fast, and this is just in 5 to 10-minute interactions with him. But at the same time, F the guy. I talked to Emily via text this past Friday. We agreed to meet the next day for lunch. I suggested this Italian place that had been our place, but she got a little upset about this, and I thought she was going to cancel. Instead, we pivoted to Applebee's. Seeing her in person, I can't even describe. She was just as beautiful as ever. The hello hug caused a shiver through my spine. I didn't want to let go and may have lingered for just a second, but also didn't want to make it weird. We exchanged pleasantries and small talk through the ordering. At that point, the conversation took the first serious turn since my return, and it stayed that way for the next hour as we talked. She told me how hard it was to deal with my death. She was pregnant and grieving, and a lot of days didn't want to carry on. It hurt so bad to listen to what she was going through. She told me she felt so alone at a time she was in our apartment that she spent most nights staying at her parents' or mine. She kept hoping that every time the phone rang, it would be someone with news about me, and then began to hope it wasn't because as time went on, it became more likely that it would be a call that they found my body. She told me about how great my parents, and to a lesser degree, my siblings had been to her. My sister-in-law and her even had slightly overlapping pregnancies, so it was fun to have someone to talk to about it. It was after Paul's first birthday that my parents, of all people, talked to her about getting back out there. She admitted she was really only spending time with her parents, or my sister-in-law, and by extension my brother. She said she even fell off hanging out with her best friend. Emily told me it was fear. She never wanted to be away from Paul. If I could disappear in an instant, then that means anyone could. She wouldn't be able to live without him. After this intervention, she realized she was living like a widow, and not a 25-year-old woman. She began hanging out with her friends again and let others watch Paul occasionally so she could go out. It was 2 months into her attempts at living life that she ran into Kevin. They were in a Starbucks. She was fumbling trying to get her phone out while holding Paul when suddenly this tall, handsome guy, my words, comes up and scans his phone, buying her coffee and a muffin. They strike up a conversation while waiting. When her order gets called, he grabs it and hands it to her along with a business card with his cell number on it. Kevin owns a screen printing shop and tells her, "No pressure, but I'd like to get to know you better." Then they part ways. She called him the next day. 4 months later, she introduced Paul to him. A year later, they moved in with him, and a few months ago, they got engaged. This is where I said my piece. I told her I still loved her, and that it's impossibly hard to see her with someone else. The idea of getting back to her was one of the few things that kept me going when I was locked away. She began to cry, and I reached out and took her hand. I asked if she was sure or if there was any way we could try again. In hindsight, I feel like this was a dive, but at the time I needed to know. She shook her head, looked up at me and said, "I love you. I never stopped, but I love Kevin too, and I'm marrying him. It's not fair. I know it's not fair. You didn't do anything wrong. Wrong, but I had to move on. I spent years thinking you had died. When you came back, I was so happy, but also so guilty." I cut her off there. "You have nothing to feel guilty about. I effed up and cost myself everything. I always knew you'd likely moved on, and I don't fault you for that. I was gone. There was no reason for you to believe I was coming back. But I did dream that I'd find my way back and you'd be there when I returned. I realized it was unrealistic. I'm sorry for putting you in this position now." She said, "It's okay. I knew this was coming eventually." We just kind of stopped talking at that point and sat there, drinking our drinks. After a few minutes that seemed like eternity, she said, "How do you want to move forward when it comes to Paul?" I told her I love him already and want to be in his life. She replied, "I'm so happy for that. I always told him about you. I didn't want him to think he was abandoned." I said he is the one bright spot in this whole situation. From there, she told me that Kevin had planned to adopt him once they were married but wouldn't now that I have returned. I am listed on the birth certificate as the father, although I think I'll meet with a lawyer just to make sure everything is in place from a legal standpoint. We made some plans to meet together later in the week with Paul, let him have fun with all of his parents at the same time. She also encouraged me to do more one-on-ones with him. At the end, we hugged one more time and parted ways. When I got back to my parents' house and in my room, I broke down. The finality of it all was just too much. After I recovered, I decided I was not going to wallow in my grief anymore. I needed to swallow some pride and get on track to do something with myself. The next day I called Kevin's brother and did an interview. That day he hired me. This is the first step towards moving on. Updates. Holy crap, you are not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. These last 6 months have been nothing short of absolutely effing crazy, but in a good way. After my first initial face-to-face with Emily, I decided I needed to move on with my life, and I ended up getting hired to be an estimator for Kevin's brother Kyle's construction company. It was going well, and about the 2-month mark, Kyle, knowing I was an architect, started asking me to design some of his custom builds, and would compare them to the usual architect he was using. He was liking mine better, and while I still work as an estimator, I'm now solely designing the custom homes for Kyle. He gave me a huge raise. This allowed me to get my own apartment, and I'm thankful to say I am no longer living in my parents' house. Emily and Kevin's wedding plans progressed with only one major change. My father was no longer walking her down the aisle. Everyone felt it was inappropriate given my return. Her much older brother was going to take that role now. Emily was an oops baby, so her brother is 16 years older than her. After our initial lunch, I saw Emily a lot more often. We were making it a point to do something all together with Paul at least once a week. Kevin was there as well, but they kept the couple behavior to a minimum. It was fun. I especially enjoyed getting to talk to Emily and just be around her. After a month of this, back-to-school season hit. I guess in the screen printing industry, this is the busy season, which makes sense with fall sports, staff shirts, clubs, Greek life. Kevin has contracts with all the school districts and is used heavily by the local colleges in the area. He became swamped at this time, which led to Emily, Paul, and I spending a lot more time just the three of us. Over the months of this, we became a lot closer. Hello side hugs became lingering full front hugs. Emily and I would talk about all sorts of things. It kind of reminded me of when we were first dating. After a couple of months, Kevin began joining us all again. This didn't dissuade Emily and I from rebuilding our friendship, and then the most amazing thing happened. Paul started calling me Dad. I literally teared up like the first 10 times he did this. Life went on for the next couple of months. It was a week before the wedding. I was not going to attend. My parents were as guests only. That weekend they decided to have semi-combined bachelor/bachelorette parties. Each was going out to dinner with friends, then friends' activities, her karaoke, him top golf. Then they all meet up at a bar or club around 11 o'clock p.m. I wasn't involved in any of this and had no idea which place they were going to end up at. I decided I was going out that night instead of just sitting in my apartment being a DT. It was a hard night for me as it was another reminder that I had lost her to someone else. No matter how good of a dude he was, I still hated it. It was around 10:30 that night. I had a good buzz and was planning on getting an Uber home when Emily and her bachelorette crew walked in. I kind of hid in the crowd at first, not wanting to butt into her night, but she spotted me. Emily came over and we began to talk. It was a little bit flirty. A song she loved came on and she began to dance, then dance on me. I joined in, and we were laughing and having fun. As the song ended, she kind of stumbled into me. I caught her and we looked at each other. Our lips moved in close and we almost kissed. When she pulled back, we laughed it off and moved to the bar to get a drink. It was probably a good thing we didn't kiss because about 2 minutes later, Kevin came walking up. He was trying to be his usual self but seemed a little off. They kissed, and I began to feel like the third wheel, so I went ahead and ordered the Uber and headed home. The next day, I was a little hungover and slept in pretty heavy on my lazy Sunday. It was midday when I heard someone try to open my door. It was locked, and they began knocking heavily. I ran over and opened the door. It was Emily. She lunged into my arms and kissed me. It was the sweetest feeling I have ever felt, confusing but sweet. I asked her what was going on. She said, "Kevin came to me this morning and started asking some hard questions. I don't want to go into it. I promise I'll tell you everything one day, but I'm in no place to do so now. We decided to end things. I admitted my feelings were still strong for you. He said he understood that it hurt but that he knew. He said we both deserve to be happy and he is going to step away. I called your parents. They are good keeping Paul a bit longer. I love you and want to be with you, and I'm suspecting you feel the same way." I told her that was all I ever wanted. It's been a whirlwind. She had 2 bags packed for her and Paul, and they moved in with me that same day. The next day, my father went to visit Kevin. He told me Kevin looked a little hungover and had taken the day off. They had a talk, and my dad tried to be as empathetic as he could. He just wanted to check on him as Kevin had been a large part of their lives over the past few years. He asked Kevin what he was going to do. He said beyond trying to get some deposits back, he had no idea. My father offered to refund him his money and take over the reservations. He didn't ask why. My father thinks he knew. While this was going on, I had to go into work and face Kyle. He called me into the office upon my arrival. Let me just say my business. I'm angry. My brother tells me to let it go, and I will. I want to take that anger out on you, but I'm not going to. My brother and I learned the hard lesson back in high school when it comes to revenge, and swore we'd always be the bigger men going forward, but that's not a tale for now. I think it's best we part ways. My family needs time to heal. I won't leave you high and dry though. You get 1 week paid off here. In that time, I want you to speak to an acquaintance of mine. Lee runs a construction company as well, and he says he will take you on at your current salary. It's commercial instead of residential, but you'll do fine. I stood up and started to thank him, but he cut me off. This isn't for you, it's for Kev. Now go get your things and get up out of here. I contacted Lee the same day. He told me I could start in 2 weeks. Once my father came back and said he now had control of the wedding accommodations, Emily and I just looked at each other and knew we each wanted this. It wasn't the wedding we always wanted. We planned on getting married on a beach. It was Kevin who wanted the traditional wedding. In the end, he was right though. We had an amazing time. George was my best man. She looked stunning in her dress. Getting me a tux rental on short notice was probably the biggest headache, but that worked out too. Neither of us had huge friend or family groups, but it was nice to enjoy celebrating with those who had supported us through all these dark times. It's been a month now since our wedding. I still can't believe it. Paul had a little trouble adjusting. He does miss Kevin, but he has seemed happier the last week. To be where I once was and be where I am now, I consider myself beyond lucky. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you really like our videos, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a good day.